Chan, the question of who pays for the protection of natural resources, I mean, that question has been a long-standing one, but I'm quite curious to know why you think the dispute between Kedah and Penang has escalated so much in recent months.
Okay, I think the first point is there is some misunderstanding from the Kedah Menteri Besar regarding this issue. I think, as we all know, the history says that every new Menteri Besar that comes on board in Kedah has always asked Penang to pay for the raw water. It draws from the Sungai Muda. But legally speaking, I'm looking at the record. The rivers actually shared between Kedah and Penang. And of course, I think in recent years, 1982, Penang signed a memorandum of understanding with Kedah to realign the state border. Previously, before 1982, the Sungai Muda, the whole of it was in flows into Penang. And then, based on that MOU, we gave half. We aligned the boundary of the river into the middle of the river. So half of the river will give back to Kedah. And because of this understanding, Kedah accepted this land mentioned above, and then in return for water guarantee to let us continue to take the water from the Sungai Muda.
Okay, so, but Professor Chan, can we talk a little bit about the water guarantees? Because it seems to be...
Is that because we gave them half the river and the land, so Kedah feels that, Penang carry on drawing the water. So there is this kind of understanding. And also, because there is understanding of the law of riparian rights, so every state, every country that shares a river basin, internationally has a law, we have a right to draw water, share the water between different states sharing the same river basin.
Right.
So,
I understand the legal arguments, Professor Chan. But I'm wondering, is that the most amicable solution? Is that the way out of this impasse?
No, I'm just getting to that, Melisa.
Okay.
So the misunderstanding is, that Kedah should ask Penang to pay for it. So Penang, of course, has no legal right or whatever responsibility to pay for that water because we are drawing from our side of the river. So now there is this big misunderstanding and there's a big spat between the two, the Menteri Besar and the CM of Penang. Things have gone really bad. There is no negotiation. There is no talking, with one another. It's just, shooting in the press. So we have gone on, started on the best foot. I think we should come to the table to talk. So the best solution, according to me, I think is to have a moderator. I think the federal government must come in now because shared river basin should come under the concurrent list. Concurrent list means that although the state has a jurisdiction over water and land, but if it is shared between a few states, in the case of the Ulu Muda, Kedah, Penang, and Police, so the federal government also should have a say, have a jurisdiction. It's under the concurrent list now. So if we set up a body with the federal government in charge, with representatives from the three state governments, also maybe from the NGO and the communities, private sector, then this authority can talk about the management of this river basin. Then there shouldn't be arguments like that, who should pay and who should not pay, who should use how much and so on. So all the management can be detailed out, and there would be very, very little argument if it is run by a central body.
Right, but in lieu, Dr. Chan, I mean, in lieu of such an eventuality as you laid out as a solution, what do you think are the options for Kedah at this point in time? Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Kedah have a rather bad experience? Promised federal monies to in order to forego, exploiting the Ulu Muda water reserve, the catchment area, and then not being paid by federal government for that. Didn't they have kind of get the short end of the stick over the last couple of decades?
Yes, we are actually we understand the Kedah position, and we would like to help them, but at the same time, I think the federal government should come up with the money that they promised some years ago. I can't remember how much. Maybe it was about 100 million, But then they didn't get a single cent. So they continue the logging, and then they look for various ways of developing the area. But then I think every development has to be, sustainable and should not have any bad effects on other states, and also not on their own, because I think Kedah also rely a lot on that water for their paddy farming, for their high-tech park and so on, and also for the people.
Right.
So Penang cannot pay. I mean, I'm not just speaking for myself. I think the government, has put it very clear that, there is no legal thing for this Penang to pay raw water. But we as the NGOs and the common people, we feel that I think payment for ecosystem services can work, which means if everybody were to protect this water catchment, then we can come up with some money. Let's say Kedah, Perlis and Penang, all these water consumers will pay a tax. Call it the ecosystem tax or whatever, but just put it into the bill, maybe just RM1 for all domestic consumers. There are millions, in Penang, in Kedah, and also in Perlis.
Professor Chan, very quickly, this is a very interesting proposition. In ecosystem tax, would that come in the form of higher payment or higher charges for paying for water? Could that translate higher water tariffs?
Melisa, I'm suggesting, this is just an example. If RM1 extra is nothing to the water consumers for the protection of this valuable and catchment that cannot be replaced. If RM1 per person per household is not enough, maybe it can be increased to 2. And 1 or 2 ringgit, you tell me what can we buy with 1 or 2 ringgit now? But to Kedah, it's a lot of money if we can get the people to pay.
Right.
But to be fair, it's not just Penang who should be paying. It's all the water consumers using the water from Ulu Muda.
Okay. Professor Chan, thank you so much for speaking with us and laying out this very complex dispute so very clearly for us. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but more on this water dispute between Kedah and Penang in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Di wilayah ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada Islam. This is orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada Islam. This is orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat.
Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa yang penting di mana sahaja anda berada.
Kerana kita hendak putuskan rantaian jangkitan.
Belanjawan dan pendekatan bertemakan survival.
Welcome back. You're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Now, if you've just joined us, we're discussing the Kedah-Penang water dispute. Can the impasse be broken? And would a resolution lead to a more sustainable and ethical approach to managing natural resources? Let's discuss. As Piarpakaran joins us on the show now, he's the president of the Association of Water and Energy Research Malaysia. Good evening, Piara. What do you make of the Kedah-Penang water dispute? Now, do you think, I'm just wondering what you think is at the heart of this issue, beyond all these outrageous threats that we've seen make headlines?
Well, I think the issue is quite simple. We know Penang needs raw water, and they're depending almost 80% from Muda River. Then, on the other hand, Kedah also needs resources to ensure it can protect the catchment areas. And in fact, this is not new. For almost a decade now, we have been proposing a raw water quality-based raw water tariff. And I think if you have heard what the ministry has said, they have come out with this grading system. That's basically what they have suggested. But they have adopted a little bit different by putting 4 levels that we have proposed for a tariff. So, end of the day, if we are not going to protect the catchment, we're going to have serious consequences, not only for Penang, but Kedah as well. So, the issue is quite simple. We need both the leaders of the states to sit together, resolve their differences, and I'm quite sure they can actually come to a good conclusion.
Piara, is there an argument to be made for states to go at it alone? For instance, for Penang perhaps to diversify its source of water or try some other solutions that might make it less dependent on Kedah? Or do you think the future lies in embracing this interdependence and finding a much more sustainable solution?
Well, if we look at Penang itself, now, generally, catchments are at the upstream, and Penang is actually at the downstream of the entire geographic location. So, like it or not, they're going to get the end part of river wherever they're going to look at. There was also a project where Penang is looking at getting raw water from Perak. There was also some disputes there, which in this we have actually supported Perak's request. Perak wants to sell treated water compared to raw water, which is a stand that we stand by. In fact, it was a mistake for Pahang to sell raw water to Selangor because if they don't do that, they are not going to protect the catchment, and at the end of the day, the treatment cost is going to go up. So there is an alternative to Penang, but I don't think so we'll be able to take up their high dependency on Muda River.
Okay, so you talked a lot about protecting water catchment areas, Piara, and I'm wondering what is the best way to do that? I mean, beyond just a mission statement of protecting water catchment areas, who should fund this protection? Who should bear the brunt of the opportunity cost lost to developing water catchment areas? How do we think through these complex issues?
Well, there are many proposals and also solutions. Now, the basic thing that we need to look at, as time passes by and the population grows, we need more water, not only for the population demand,
but also for the economy to grow. We have at about close to 2/3 of treated water consumption falling into the domestic consumers category, and the balance goes to the non-domestic, which is the commercial and business sector. Now, if we look at the history of Ulu Muda Forest Reserve, at about 1932, at about 105,000 hectares was gazetted. In 2013, at about 1,300 hectares. I mean, it doesn't make sense. In 1932, you have gazetted so much, and after so long, and you only managed to add a little bit more. And perhaps it's because there's already constraint. A lot of areas has been developed. Now, states will lose income if we are preventing them from developing these areas. That's the reason why we proposed this particular raw water quality-based raw water tariff, where the states get some form of compensation. But this tariff has a carrot and stick approach, where if states continue to provide good quality of water, treatment costs actually will come down. So in this sense, we will actually be able to pay the states more. When they protect the catchment, the quality of raw water starts to increase. On the other end, if state fails to protect the catchment area and the treatment costs start to increase, we will pay a lower level of tariff to the state. End of the day, this cost will be passed on to consumers. But do not have a knee-jerk reaction that this is going to increase tariffs manifold. No, we are talking about few cents per cubic meter, and we are paying at about 50 cents for the first 20 cubic meter, 50 cents to 70 cents. So it's actually not a big amount, but it will actually ensure we have enough water to sustain in the longer run.
Okay, Piara, sorry, very quickly, if I can ask you, I mean, the dispute seems to pivot on one kind of somewhat legalistic position that Penang takes, which is that they already have a deal and that Kedah must honor that deal. But do you think, the critics of that would say, well, in the long term, everybody suffers if they take and hold on to that legalistic position? What's your take on that?
Then my question is, why Kedah is charging 6 cents per cubic meter for the raw water in Penang? If 80% is coming from Kedah, right? So Penang needs to be quite general, be very frank. Yes, you are talking about riparian rights, but at the same time, you also must ensure when you as a state, you want to develop, there has been so much of funding for infrastructure, everything coming to Penang. Other states do want to develop as well. But when we prevent them by pushing them to protect the catchment areas, the best way is why can't Penang share the 6 cents that they're collecting? It's actually a cost that they are already imposing to their public in Penang. So I don't think so. If Penang start to raise the issue that the cost is going to go up, no, it will not. We are talking about small volume, small value, which if you take for 20 cubic meter or even 30 or 40 cubic meter, it's not going to give a huge impact. But we will be able to protect the catchment, because the benefit for Penang is when you make this deal, you're going to sign a real agreement where you're going to bind Kedah to protect the catchment areas. When they fail to do that, yes, you can take a legal action, because they promise you with this rate they're going to protect the catchment. Which are the areas need to be protected? What are the function and roles of Kedah and Penang? Right. So if any party to the agreement fails to follow that, then obviously they can go to court.
That's an interesting proposal. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Piara. Appreciate your time. Okay, we're going to be back with more in just a couple minutes. Stay tuned to consider this.
Malaysia ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Hentikan induknya adalah Melayu balik kepada Islam.
Orang yang membuat polisi,
kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine, mungkin kita berbeza pandangan,
tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Hentikan induknya adalah Melayu balik kepada Islam.
Orang yang membuat polisi,
kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine, mungkin kita berbeza pandangan,
tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat back air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat.
Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about the water dispute between Penang and Kedah and how that reflects a wider issue of shared responsibility of managing natural resources. Professor Dr. Maketab Mohamed is a water quality and water quality modelling expert. Professor Maketab, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Now, I'm looking at some of the headlines and most of them seem to have cast the Kedah position in a somewhat negative light. But I'm wondering about where you stand, what you think. Is the argument that's made by the Kedah Menteri Besar, is that argument unreasonable?
Well, I might be a little bit biased because basically my home state is Kedah. I was born in Kelantan, but my home state is Kedah. But the whole issue of the water resources, I try to be as, as fair as possible. Basically, water is for everybody, all right? So we cannot say, oh, because Kedah owns, you cannot share with anybody, you know. But in the meantime, because Kedah is a relatively poor state relative to the neighbor Penang, and as of from for a long time, Penang have been getting water from Sungai Muda. I mean, for free, 100% free. I mean, because they said, oh, we withdraw the water from
the border. But in the long term, we have to look as of management purposes.
All right. Who owns the water, basically, when we look at the borders and the watershed, you know, the water catchment area? 95% or even higher of the watershed or the catchment area is of Sungai Muda is basically in on the Kedah side. The only thing is Penang keep saying, oh, please keep the water clean, keep the water coming, keep the please take care of the water for me. But without have any obligation to help, to pay or to help in the management of the whole thing. So we have to consider, I mean, if the shared responsibility, if Penang want to withdraw water as much as possible for their use, for their domestic use, for their industrial use, I mean, in the present situation in the future, then have to manage the water resources in the Sungai Muda watershed.
Right. Professor Maketab, there is a position, I think that Penang has put out that they would like the federal government to come in and intervene and to support Kedah in maintaining the pristine Ulu Muda Reserve water catchment area. Is that a solution, going to the federal government and getting them to pay?
Well, they never. The problem is Penang have been saying all this while. The what I call it, Deputy Chief Minister too, been saying, oh, we won't say a cent. You know, that's very insulting. I mean, that kind of attitude is very arrogant. You know, there's no way, what you call it, you can talk across face-to-face on the table when we say, oh, we won't pay a cent. That's not a way of managing a resource, which is not even yours in the first place.
Right. We understand that negotiations have come to an impasse, and earlier we spoke to Professor Ngai Weng from Water in Penang. So Water Watch Penang. So he was suggesting perhaps a moderator is needed to help break this impasse. Do you agree? Do you see anyone who might fit that role of moderator to break this impasse?
Basically, we have SPAN. SPAN have the role as of the Suruhanjaya, as of water resources, basically the literal translation. But SPAN themselves kept silent, and I don't know what role they want to play. But they can, if they, they can be the moderator in the middle. But at the same time, going to the negotiation table, both sides have to come with the open heart. If you are arrogant like what the Penang people are doing, there's no way of a negotiation. I mean, you're going with such arrogance, with such attitude, saying, "Oh, we won't pay a cent." You don't do that.
Okay, Professor Maketab, do you think this is a political question in that each of the Menteri Besar and the chief ministers are playing to a gallery? They, and in Penang, the question of paying more or accepting a certain responsibility, might stick in the throat of many members of the public. How do we get the public to understand this concept of shared responsibility, especially for resources that go across state borders but within a certain ecosystem?
Well, I mean, you don't have to go far to compare, not just, we're talking about only between two states. How about Johor doing relatively well with Singapore? I mean, for how many years already they have some problem because some political things. But actually, on the ground, the water resources speaker, Bakaj and all that, with the Penang side, the Singapore side, PUB, working very well. Even water treatment, sometimes we have problem of water treatment on the Johor side. Then PUB willingly to treat the water and that kind of responsibility. When the Lingu Dam was built, a lot of the bulk of the money comes from Singapore. So why is the problem? The willingness to sit down and consider many alternatives, how we can work together in taking care of something so basic, so necessary for all our citizens. So if Singapore and Johor can do it, why not Penang and Kedah?
Professor Maketab, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. But before we leave you, a quick reminder. Don't forget that you can get all the latest news and information of COVID-19 vaccines at AstroAwani.com and the Astro AWANI app. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We'll be with you same time tomorrow. Till then, good night.